Obviously, they've been dominating the IHL. But what do you...
They have and they haven't.
Well, okay.
I mean,
they've come up with the cup the last 3 years.
Yes.
Not necessarily in the regular season. Muskegon's been the team. They had the offense, Bouchard, everything.
But Muskegon and Port Huron were really good teams. I mean, they should have lost to Port Huron. If Larry Sterling doesn't get hurt, the Komets are not celebrating today. They lose that series because Port Huron didn't have a solid backup goaltender. And Larry Sterling was the best player in that series the first 4 games.
Yeah, he was just a young guy. But when you take a look at it, do you feel like... I think the perception around the league is that the Komets own the IHL at this point. Where do you see as the future of the IHL? Should the Komets look to move up? Where do you see the Komets ending up next year? Where do you see the IHL next year? Because right now, I mean, it's Komet dominated. And like you mentioned earlier, people outside of Fort Wayne, in Flint, in Muskegon, they hate the Komets.
Sure. And part of the fun of sports is hating the opponent. I mean, and rather than the referee. You know, part of this argument, Glenn, goes to, you know, should the Komets have more against them? Should they lower their level of expectations to meet everybody else? Well, why can't everybody else raise their level of expectations? You know, nobody markets like the Komets. Why don't they? They have the same opportunities to sell ads on the ice and to do the marketing. The problem is they hire some kid right out of college because they're cheap. And they say, well, go do this. Well, they don't know how to do this. They hire a PR director who's right out of college. And they learn as the season goes along. But you got to do all this in the summer. You don't have. It doesn't start when the season starts. You have to work all summer. I mean, Scott Sproat started for next season in January this year. This is a full-time gig. This isn't something you can be cheap and get away with it. There's no excuses for that. It's why doesn't everybody else more follow the Komets' example and raise their level versus the Komets? Everybody wants the Komets to lower theirs.
Yeah. That said, do you see the Komets looking to move at all in the future, or looking to bolster the league somehow?
I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen right now. I think everybody's in the ownership groups. They're trying to make it work because they realize if they go to the East Coast League or they go to the Central League, your player costs are going to rise and your travel budget's going to go through the roof. I mean, you know, the East Coast League was playing playoff games on Tuesday and Wednesday night. You might as well just write a check. You're not making any money off of those. There's no way. I mean, that's just stupid. I think the IHL, if they stick around, made a great move by trying to end the season on March 31st so that the playoffs are done by April 31st. That is a great move because then you're not competing as much for building dates with graduations and everything else. That's a really good move. We'll see. I think the owners are going to wait till the last possible second, which will probably be the first week in June, and then they're going to have to say, we're going to go X. That's the best option for us. And it was so funny that everybody thinks it's so much better in other leagues, and if half of the stuff I hear is true, the other leagues are like begging the IHL to come in and stabilize them. And I mean, I don't think it's better anywhere else.
Well, when you take a look at, switching gears just a little bit, to the roster, to the make of this roster, you know, we've been talking for the last few years. It gets older every year. They're not getting a whole lot younger as far as the core group of players. And there's some, I don't know, rumors out there that the IHL will cut down on the number of veterans that you'll be able to keep next year. I think it's from 8 to 6. Is that correct?
I don't know. They haven't
as a possibility?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it went to 5. I mean, and I think they're going to cut the salary cap too. That is one way you can kind of help the other teams, is to cut the salary cap so they don't have to try to compete at the same financial level. That's one option that they can do. And I think that will happen. I think they'll cut the number of vets to 5 or 6, and they'll cut the salary cap so it's more in line with what the ECHL is in the Central Hockey League, which would be 11,000, I think.
Well, if you look at that, then what happens to the guys who are, let's say, on the tail end of their career? PC played great, but he's one of the older players on the team. Same with Bertram, same with Colin Chalk. Guy Dupuis 40. He doesn't look like he's 40, but he is 40 years old. What happens to that core group of guys?
Well, that's some tough decisions to make, because if they want to come back, which I believe most of them do, those guys are going to have to look at taking pay cuts. And do they want to do that to still do this? That's the question. I mean, and that's part of the thing that has to be worked out over the next month or so. And part of it is the Komets also realize they have to start rebuilding a little bit. You got to kind of rebuild on the fly here somewhat. You have a great young core this year to be able to do that with Bobby Phillips and Danko and Frankie DeAngelis and Kaylee Schrock and Sean O'Connor. I mean, but those guys are going to want raises too. They've earned them. So something's got to give. And you're also going to want to try to bring in possibly a player like a Matthew Curado. He might want to come back. I mean, and he could end up being a captain in 2 or 3 years. Well, he's not going to be inexpensive either. So it's a really tight balancing act with all of this.
My final question is this going to be one of the more interesting off seasons for the Komets? Because you're on that point with the Warner and the Schrocks and those guys. Are they going to be lifers, essentially? And then what do you do with the older guys, too?
And the league, I mean, you know what? There is no summer anymore. I mean, we have 139 days until training camp starts. You know what I mean? And there'll be something happening pretty much every week. There really isn't any time off anymore for minor league hockey, especially when there's this much interest from the fans. And you know, there's so many great stories to tell with these guys because they have been here so long, and they have become such a fabric of the community too.
All right, Comet jersey auction, stick auction coming up. Celebration tomorrow night, 6:30 at Memorial Coliseum. So that'll be exciting. Proceeds going to charity, but also you guys are doing some special things in the News Sentinel. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we've got an 8-page section coming tomorrow. I was just finishing it up, and there's pretty much a 4-page section in tonight's paper. There's just. And I'm still not done telling stories about this year. You know, I mean, there's still a few stories I want to tell yet that we're going to tell the rest of the week.
All right. Sounds good. Look forward to the News Sentinel tomorrow afternoon. But for now, he's Blake Sebring. I'm Glenn Marini. And thanks for logging on to Wayne.com.